Producer, and this will be a recorded session. Suzana is professor of clinical emergency medicine and vice chair of education in the Department of Emergency Medicine, and she has leadership roles both at Penn and in national organizations. What I thought was so interesting about her bio is she has interest in using technology to create innovative methods for teaching and coaching medical students. She's trained as a life coach, and I can tell you, I met her at the AAMC, and I can tell you that her approach to life and the way she comes off to a complete stranger is so impressive and welcoming that we wanted to highlight her for focus. So Suzana, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here with all of you, and thank you for that very kind introduction. So the other two other housekeeping things I want to talk about before we start the lecture. CME credit is available for this, and so Sue will email everyone after this so you can claim that credit. And then in terms of questions, if you have questions as we go along, throw it in the chat. I'll get to the questions at the end, but if you want to throw it in as you're going so you don't forget. And then there'll be a couple times where I'll ask questions of the group. Just throw your answers in the chat, and Lucy will be monitoring the chat for me. And then, like we said, this is being recorded. So a little bit about me. So like Lucy said, I am professor of emergency medicine in the emergency department. I'm vice chair of education for the emergency department. I also do some co-directing for a virtual reality platform that we're creating for medical students. And I'm also a certified life coach. In addition to those roles, like most of us here, I am a wife. I am a mother of 2 children. I have a sister. I'm a daughter of 2 aging parents. And the reason I say all this is because we're all in similar situations, right? We have all of our work responsibilities, we have our life responsibilities, and then we have just, our general interests and the things that we love. And so really this talk is going over, and you know what, actually, hang on one second. I just realized that I pulled up the wrong version. So a little bit of a technical issue here. I'm going to just reshare. As I was going through, I realized it was an outdated slide. Okay, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me just go back into Zoom. Nothing like saying that you do virtual reality and technology and then go through a technology issue. Okay, perfect. All right, we are back on track, I think. Can you see my screen?
Yep, it's up and ready.
Excellent. Okay. And so the reason I say this to everyone is we're all in the same situation. We're all balancing and juggling a lot of different responsibilities in our professional and our personal life. And really what I want to talk to everybody about is this concept of work-life balance and why I've come to hate it and what we can do instead. So objectives for this talk today is to understand how trying to achieve this work-life balance can actually contribute to burnout and contribute to unhappiness. I'm going to talk about ways that you can identify and utilize your own personal core values to increase joy and fulfillment in your personal and work life. And then along the way, identify some limiting beliefs and learn how we can incorporate a more deliberate mindset shift to create more time and space in your life for the things that truly matter to you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my path through my career. So I remember being young, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but really kind of instilled in me, you can have it all. You can do everything. You can have the family, you can have the career. And that's what I really went through college and med school thinking. Then around med school and residency, this concept of work-life balance, right? You can have it all. You just have to learn how to balance it all perfectly, and then you'll be happy and everything will be the way it should. Then around 2013, you might have remembered the book Lean In. And by that time, I had already had 2 young kids under 2 years old. And I could not lean any further in any other direction because I was about ready to topple over. And so what I don't like about all of these concepts that we've been fed is that they don't take into consideration you, who you are, what you want, right? You're given this ideal of what you should work for, but never asked, what is it exactly you want? Who are you? And how do you want to go about doing this? So I'm going to take work-life balance because that is really the prevailing one I hear all the time. And I'm going to say I talk a lot about the perspective of being a working mom, but these concepts really apply to, you know, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you have kids, if you don't have kids. But so if you hear me reference being a mom and kids, I'm speaking about it from my perspective and my experience. So work-life balance, you know, we're still fed that we're trying to figure out how to do this. If you watch celebrities being interviewed, it's always like, oh, a female celebrities, you know, how do you balance work and children? And so I'm first going to go through a couple of reasons why I think work-life balance is not our goal. And then we'll talk about some strategies of what we can do to create this life that we love. So the first thing with work-life balance is I don't think it's sustainable. So now here's the first part in the chat. I want you guys to put in, have you ever had a moment in your life, whether it's a day, a week, an hour, where you actually did feel like you were balancing it all? So I definitely have, where I'm like, oh my God, everything is working out perfectly. I am like a superstar at work. I'm a rock star mom. Like everything's going right in my relationship. So show of hands, or if there are people in the chat saying, yeah, I've had this for small periods of time.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Then what happens? So here you are, you're spinning all these plates, everything's going great. And then what happens? A ball
Lasts
gets
for 5 minutes, briefly, very rare, but it happens.
exactly. So what happens? So you get a ball thrown at one of these plates, right? So I'll give an easy example for anyone who has kids. You're working, your day's planned, everything's going great. And then all of a sudden it's the school nurse saying, guess what? Zoe has a fever. You have to come pick her up. And then you're like, okay, great. How do I rearrange all of these things? Then let's take something a little bit bigger. So this happened to me a couple of years ago where all of a sudden now my mom is going through major health issues and my parents are going through financial issues. And so now I have to figure out, had everything balanced, but now do I have to figure out how to manage her medical stuff and how to manage her finances, right? And then let's not forget the biggest ball that got thrown to all of us, like a global pandemic happens and you have to rethink how you're doing your clinical care. You have to rethink how your kids are going to school. You know, for me, you know, I was clerkship director at that time. We had to transition all of our in-person experiences to virtual experiences. Well, what happens when all these balls get thrown at us? The plates fall down and break, right? But instead of saying, being able to adapt and move forward, or saying, you know, hey, these were rough circumstances that were sent to us, if you're like me, what you start thinking is, there's something wrong with me. If I was better at this work-life balance, if I was a better mom, if I was a better, you know, employee or physician, I would have been able to keep all these plates up in the air. But we know that that's not true. We know life is going to throw those balls at us. So why are we trying to do something that we know is inevitably going to fail? The second thing, I'm going to argue that you don't really want work-life balance, right? So at the end of your life, do you want to look back and have people say, Suzana lived a balanced life. It was so inspiring. What do you guys really want? When you say you want work-life balance, what are the things in your life that you're really saying you want? Throw some examples up in the chat. This is always the weird thing with doing like virtual. It's not that quick.
Not to feel exhausted, less work, an hour to myself to do with what I want, to feel confident in all areas at all times, to be intentional with time.
Exactly. And so if we boil all those down, at the very core of all this is we want to enjoy our life, right? We don't want to run around struggling to balance everything. We want to actually have a fun life that's worth living. All right. Last point about work-life balance is it's really focused on the how. So when you talk about work-life balance, everyone then gives you like the planner that you need to use, or the app you need to use, or the structure you need to use. And when we focus on the how, we're forgetting about what we really want. So this kid here, I'm not a pediatrician, so I forget exactly where the milestones are, but this kid here, they're doing what? They're cruising, right? They're looking for something. And so What is motivating this child to try and learn how to walk? Do you think they're focused with how am I going to do it? What are the steps? What is the plan? Probably not, right? What do you think is motivating this child? What is often the distance that we're not seeing on the screen that this child is looking at and getting them to move? Throw it in the chat. What do you think this kid's doing?
Want to grab something they like? Dog mom snacks?
Exactly.
Enthusiasm to explore something he wants, exploring, I want to get there to want to get that there.
Exactly. I look at this, my kids were a little bit of more adventurous, high energy kids. So I look at this and I'm like, there is something that is dangerous that this kid has identified that I've forgotten to remove, and they want to find it and put it in their mouth. So this kid is not figuring out the how of walking. There, he has the why, right? This child is looking and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want that. I know my why. I know what I need, and I'm moving forward. So when you stop looking at work-life balance and start looking at what your why is, the rest is going to follow. So start with the why and the how will follow. Okay. So now I hope I've kind of explained to you why I think trying to achieve work-life balance is the wrong outcome for us to look at. But then where do we go from here, right? So if we're not trying to find work-life balance and I'm telling you, you shouldn't look for one specific plan, what do we actually do? I think we need to look for a framework or a paradigm that encompasses these three things. So first of all, it needs to be customized to you, okay? It needs to be things you want, things that are important to you, that you employ in a method that works for you. So it shouldn't be, I would argue you should never take someone else's plan or someone else's design and just use it face value. You need to adjust it for the things in your life. It needs to be flexible. Remember, we have all these plates in the air. We know these balls are going to be flown at us or thrown at us. And so we need a plan that can be easily adjusted. It would be nice, instead of having plates crash down, if we were intentionally able to put some plates down when we recognize things were getting busier or there were other issues, and then pick the plates up when and if we have time, and be deliberate about which plates we are going to pick up. We don't need to pick up all the plates. And then it needs to be dynamic, right? So I'm going to again speak from the experience of a mom. What my life looks like in September during back to school season is much different than it looks like on winter break, which is much different than it looks like in the middle of the school year, and much different than how it looks in the summer. So we can't stick to one rigid plan or framework and expect that to be applicable across our whole entire life or our whole entire year. So what might this new framework look like? So this is kind of what I use when I'm coaching people in terms of going through really identifying what's important to their life, what changes they want to make, and then trying out these new processes. And, you know, it does have some research backing, is that it loosely aligns with the intentional change theory. And so you can look at that. I don't have slides specifically on that, but so it kind of follows that format for change. And it starts with a couple things. So first, figuring out your core values. So that's who you are and why you want to do things. All right. Once we know that, then thinking about what is our ideal. And I left it as just plain ideal and current, because you can really apply this to all aspects of your life. You can apply this to scheduling your day. You can apply this to what you want from a relationship. You can apply this to your job and your career and what you want next. So what you use this for has many, many applications. So you figure your core values, then you figure out what is your ideal, and then you take a hard, honest look at where you are. And then once you have that, you start curating. You start deciding what are the things you want to keep, what are the things you want to get rid of, what are the next strategies you're going to employ. And the reason it's the circle going around is because, you know, the core values I have now are similar to, but probably not the same as 20 Suzana, right? So this is a process that, you know, I revisit during different seasons or during periods of big change in my life. But then also something I revisit yearly just to make sure that I'm still being true to who I am. So let's talk about core values first, okay? When we traditionally think about core values, we think about, a big corporation and the core values that are listed on the wall on this dusty poster with like a mission and vision statement. And perhaps we never even go back to those core values. You're not even sure if people are using those core values. That is not what I'm talking about here. For your personal core values, they need to be the things that when you hear those words, they instill a feeling of like, yes, that is completely me. That's what it means to be me. That is me in my purest sense. I'm really into the concept of like flow state. And so that's another way to look at it. When you read off your list of core values, you should feel like how you are when you're in this flow state that you're totally immersed in a project. You're like, yes, this is me without any effort. Now, I've read books and I've played around with core values in the past, and a lot of them will tell you, like, look at a list of core values and pick what resonates with you. And I don't love that approach because I think what ends up happening is we end up picking things that are aspirational. It's maybe who we want to be, but it's not who we are right now. And so I'd worked with a coach probably about 4 or 5 years ago who went through this exercise on how to identify your core values, and I love it. And it's what I use with my clients, but I think there's probably a way where you could do it on your own. So the first step is you're going to write down your 3 best memories or like 3 projects or activities that really get you inspired. In terms of the 3 best memories, we're not going to be judgmental about what memories we pick, right? So I will tell you, when I did this, it wasn't my wedding and it wasn't the birth of my kids, even though I love all of them very, very much, but it wasn't the memories that really encompassed when I truly just felt me. So you're going to just freeform write down your 3 best memories. If you don't have 3 of them, add in some projects or activities. Okay. You're not going to think about it. You're not going to judge it. You're just free thought, write it down. Then what you're going to do is you're going to read what you have, and then for each of the memories or activities, you're going to pull out what core values best fits with that experience. So typically when I do this with clients, we end up with a list of about 20 core values, right? And that's when we really have to declutter and curate them down. I used to have 10 because I couldn't make a decision between the 2, and 10 is too many for us to keep in our mind. So really try to distill and combine them to the 3 to 5 that really most resonate with you. So for example, and the other thing is they need to make sense to you, okay? They don't have to be words or topics that make sense to anyone else. So for myself, my core values when I went through this is connection, right? So this is connection with myself, connection with nature, it encompasses spirituality, encompasses connection with family, friends, comfort. And this is not in the I never want to be uncomfortable, but like physical comfort, having a cozy house, being in cozy clothes, like those things are just really kind of important to me. Fun. So for me, if I can make anything fun, it's going to be a lot easier for me to do. I love incorporating fun into anything that I'm doing. Value. So I really get excited when I'm doing something that provides value to other people. And then authentic flow. Again, I talked to you about this flow state. I love when I can get into projects, activities, conversations where you're just in that flow state. You forget about time or space. And so it's important for me to identify and look for these opportunities in my life. All right. So now you have your core values. It's time to start thinking about what would your ideal be. Now, for this example, as we're going through, I'm going to do ideal day, but like I said, you can apply it to anything. So what do you want your ideal day to look like? Now, how many folks have actually spent any time like where you take away all of the restrictions you have in your mind, right? You're not saying this couldn't possibly be or this or that, and you really dream big and think about what you want your life to look like. Has anyone done that recently? I'll let Lucy look at the chat.
No.
Yeah, exactly. The last time we did this was like in our 20s, right? When we're thinking about like, what does our career look like? What's our future going to look like? And then somewhere along the line, we stop thinking about these things, right? We start falling into the shoulds. This is what I should be doing. This is what someone tells me I have to be doing. And we stop dreaming about what we actually want, right? And so the reason I really want you to look at what you want your ideal to be, like your ideal day, is because it provides a direction for your life, a direction that you want to go to, and a direction that is customized to you. So write it all down, dream big, use your core values as a guide. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. So when I look at my core values as a guide, I'm like, all right, so my ideal day, to fill connection core value, I want to have time with my kids, my husband, myself, right? I want to be connected to myself, friends, family, nature, spirituality, comfort. I talked about being cozy, but also moving my body, feeling comfortable in my body. So that's where exercise kind of comes into that, because it makes me feel comfortable in my body. Time to zone out. So you see all of the things I put in there. Fun, I said gamification, if I can make anything fun. And then you can see the other examples that I have for value and flow. And look, I'm not being judgmental on some of the things, like in authentic flow, like binging on Netflix. Like I really enjoy binging on Netflix. I want to do it. I'm not going to take that out of my life. So this isn't an exercise where all of a sudden you're going to take some of the fun things out of your life and do what you're supposed to do. What do you really enjoy doing? Now I'm going to show you an example on the next slide about how I apply this to different seasons. So the last time I did this lecture was right before Christmas. And we all know, like, so I celebrate Christmas, but the holiday season can be crazy, right? And that's a huge time of stress for people. And so I was like, all right, I don't have a stressful holiday season. What is my ideal holiday season according to my core values? And these are the things I had here: spending time with family, the town tree lighting, Yule Town, all of this. Now, for the people that work in my department, and if any of my bosses are on, notice that like the holiday party for the department is not on it. It's not one of the things I like. I don't love being in like the big groups like that. I don't enjoy it. If I need to go to these things, I absolutely can and do, but it's not in my ideal, right? So I'm not going to worry if I can't make the holiday party. Holiday cards, it's not on here. I actually stopped doing holiday cards a couple of years ago because I was like, it just stresses me out and I don't enjoy doing it. So these are the kind of shifts when you start looking at your ideal, that you think about, why am I doing these things and do I still want to keep doing them? When you're doing this, I'm going to urge you to be very specific about your time, like work, family, hobbies. Be very specific about the things that you want to do, just like I showed you in the prior slide. And then if you're doing this for your day, I want you to write down, what would your ideal day? You pick whatever categories you want and put how many hours you want to be doing this on your ideal day. Now, I wrote here, work 4 to 6 hours a day. There is no emergency department in this country that is going to have a 4 or 6 hour shift. Although I do say that, and there are some ERs in Canada that solve their night shift problem by doing what's called casino shifts, where they work about 6 hours. So that's not even actually true that there's nowhere that would do 4 to 6 hours. But I know that to keep my job, I have to work a little bit more than 4 to 6 hours a day. But we're just dreaming big. We're just putting the direction that we need to go to. It's not that we're saying we're going to get exactly this hour breakdown. In fact, if you look at the hour breakdown doesn't even make sense in a day, right? So we're just saying, in general, how many hours would you like to spend in these categories? And this is where we're going to have to start talking about one of our first mindset shifts, right? So whenever I tell people to do this, when I'm working with clients, they're like, well, I feel like it's selfish to think about me. I don't have time for me, right? Plug in whatever variant of this thought that goes through your head. I'm going to show you this infographic from Adam Grant, who I love. I actually highly recommend people to follow him on Instagram, not just because he's here at Penn, but because his stuff is amazing. And I did read this book, Hidden Potential, which I thought was fantastic. Now, in the black is what he actually wrote, which is talking about workplace culture and when you should take a break. And it says, in toxic cultures, you only take it when you earn one. And you could see by the graphic, you end up being very burnt out by that. And in vibrant cultures, you don't wait till you need one. You actually take breaks when you get one. And I think we can adapt this to, you can think about you when. So when we're burnt out, when we're not doing anything for ourselves, we only think about ourselves when we feel like everyone else is taken care of, right? And from my perspective as a mother, I think that is very prominent in motherhood culture. I think in physicians as well, right? We don't take breaks. We don't think about ourselves until we know that all of our patients, everyone else is taken care of. Well, that might explain why we're getting burnt out in record numbers. So then along the spectrum, you think about yourself when you have time to think about yourself, right? But really, if we really want this vibrant, joyful life, we should be thinking about ourselves a little bit every day, right? And I know everyone's going to say this is so selfish to think about yourself, which is it's so selfish to think about ourselves. But I think the mindset shift is to replace the I don't have time, it's selfish to think about me with I need to think about me so that I have bandwidth to take care of everybody else, right? And we all know this, and everyone's all had the analogy of the airplane where the oxygen mask comes on and they say, put your oxygen mask on first. We know this intellectually, but we don't know this internally, right? We don't really embody this. But I really encourage you. I've worked with a lot of women who are like, well, I can take a break when this was a stay-at-home mom that I was working with. And she's like, well, I have to do all this to earn this. And I'm like, do you? Let's really question this thought. Do you need to earn a break? And this was like literally getting her to find 30 minutes to take a walk every day. So it is amazing how prevalent this is. And I would urge you, like I said, to try to think about incorporating doing something for yourself and thinking about yourself every day. Okay. So now we have our core values, we have our ideal day, and now we're going to look at where are we right now? What does our current day look like? So again, if you were applying this to relationships or jobs, you would talk about like where your current relationship or your current job is. But in terms of planning your day, I want you to write down everything you do in a day or everything you do in a week. Literally pull out whatever scheduling mechanism you use and just write it all down, do a brain dump. And then look at about how many hours are you spending a day in those categories that you identified earlier in your ideal. So how much time do you spend on yourself? How much time do you spend with kids, work, husband? Again, whatever categories you picked. These were my categories here. Working a ton, have some time with my kids, but barely time for my husband, barely time for family and friends, and no time for myself. Okay. So how is this going to look? How are we going to put this all together? So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have our ideal day, which is what we want to do, right? That's like where we mapped out with our core values, how we want to spend our time. And then our actual day, the list of everything we're actually doing. And on the right, we have our ideal day of like how many hours, how do we want to spend our time? And then our actual day of how we are actually spending our time. Now we're going to find some way to meld the two together or move in the direction of our ideal. So again, when I compare my two side by side, I'm like, all right, there is a lot of room for movement from my current day to my ideal day. So we're going to go back to that list. So you have the list of all the things that you're currently doing, the list of where you're at, and you're going to map it to your core values, right? Again, no judgment, no nothing. If you have something and it aligns with the core value or multiple core values, you just write that down. And if it doesn't align to anything, you just leave it. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to use this to declutter our mind, declutter our day. So when we're looking at our day and our schedule, oftentimes it's decluttering the things we have in our day. Sometimes when we're looking at it in terms of like our jobs or relationships or other things, maybe we're writing down a lot of the thoughts and the mindsets that we have, and then we're decluttering which ones really, eliminating which ones don't align with our core values and really keeping the ones that align with our core values. And we're questioning everything we think. So the next mindset shift is, this will never happen. Look, Suzana, I've looked at your hours of your actual day and your real day, and I know my hours, and I'm never, ever going to get there. It's impossible. This is just not realistic for my life. But the thing is that as physicians, we're really good at looking for the problems, right? That's what we're trained to do. And especially in emergency medicine, right? Where's the emergency? Where's the life threat? And so we ask our brains these questions, and they're really good at finding the answers. So if you're going to ask how it's impossible, you're going to find a lot of answers of why you can't do this. But what if you just asked, okay, maybe it's not possible, but if it could happen, what might it look like, right? What might it look like to get a little bit closer to my work hours? What might it look like to get a little bit more time with my significant other? And like I said, we're going to take everything that we have, when we did our ideal, we're kind of thinking, everyone always talks about the decluttering, Marie Kondo, like, does it spark joy? I love all those books. I love the minimalistic books. And so, the first step is always, when you talk about like decluttering your wardrobe, like, well, what outfits do you actually need, right? And then they say, pick everything out, throw it on the bed, and see what you actually have. And so that's what we've done. We figured out what we want our life to do. We've taken everything out of the closet and thrown it out on the bed. And now we're going to go through this list that we've matched to our core values, and we're going to decide what are the things we want to keep, what are the things we want to reframe, what are the things we want to outsource, and what are the things that we want to eliminate, right? Because we've already shown that the things we have in our life right now are not giving us anywhere near what our ideal life is, or what our ideal life that we want. Okay. So obviously the things that really align with your core values, you love, you keep, those are easy, right? They stay on your list, you keep them. Okay. So going back to like, here are my core values when I was going through this. So let's talk about something I reframed. Carpool. So there's lots of activities my kids do by choice. And I used to dread driving them to all of these activities, right? It was just like, this major sink in my time, right? You finish a busy day, you're trying to get dinner on the table, and then you're running this one out and that one out. And so initially I was like, that doesn't really, how does that fit into my core values? Like, I'm literally just being a chauffeur. But then I thought about it a little bit more. And so, when my kids are in the car, and they have their friends and we're running a carpool and I have the music on, and I just turn it down slightly and I listen into what they're saying. And it gives me a connection to them in their life, right? They don't realize I'm listening. I see what's going on. And then on the days where they don't have carpool, it's literally one-on-one time that I can have with my kids, that I wasn't appreciating it as time with my kids because I was looking at it as this big, annoying thing that I had to do every day. It is fun. My kids happen to do sports. They do soccer and gymnastics, and they're sports that I genuinely enjoy, even outside of the fact that they're in it. So it is fun for me. And I do think it's providing a value to them in their life. So it actually does fulfill my core values. Now, I'm not going to tell you that at 9 o'clock at night when I have to go pick up my daughter in gymnastics, I'm like, woo, let's go. It's filling all my core values. But I do dread it less, and it doesn't bother me as much. And that simple mind shift for me has changed everything. So I'm going to look at an example of outsourcing. So summer camp. So both my husband and I work full time. So our kids have to go to summer camp, right? And I just hate it. I hate trying to keep track of the deadlines, doing the forms, all of that stuff. So this is outsourced to my husband. And when I talk about outsourcing, it doesn't necessarily have to be external. You can outsource it to another member of your family. And turns out he's actually really good at keeping up on emails and keeping up on deadlines. And so I don't do any part of the summer camp. Now, what that means is I don't really go back in later and criticize him for how he's done the summer camps or which summer camps he's picked, right? Like, I've outsourced it, so I don't trust that he's going to go do it. But it's just off my list. I don't do any part of it. And you can imagine other things that you can outsource in your life. I mean, definitely, I've outsourced my cleaning. You could outsource kitchen cooking and that kind of stuff if you have the time or funds. But think creatively about other things you can outsource. Carpooling is another one. I had a conversation with a coworker the other day who was like, yeah, how do you start getting into like the carpooling thing? And I'm like, oh my God, just go up to any parent in whatever activity your kids are in and ask, do you want to carpool? You'll have a ton of responses. Yes. So carpooling is another way to outsource on some days. So again, the things that don't fit with your core values, but they're not something you want to completely eliminate, see ways which you can outsource. And then let's talk about eliminating, because this is really the hardest part, right? Like when you're really cutting something out that there's somewhere that society has told you this is deemed important. I can't cut this out. So I'll use an example in my life. So 3 years ago, when I became vice chair, I also got invited to be on the executive committee for clerkship directors in emergency medicine. And I knew at the time there was like a little nagging feeling of like, I don't know if this is something I want to do, but I'm like, I should do this, right? Like, I need to be more involved on the national level. I got this invitation. People are expecting me to do it. And so I said yes. And it was terrible. It really didn't fill in any of my core values. It was taking away from other things that I really liked. And I had actually talked to mentors about this outside of Penn, who were like, no, you should do this. And, not only should you do this, but you should really be involved in writing this paper. about test writing, because at that time I was helping to rewrite the fourth year exam for this organization. And I just decided at one point, I'm like, this is not for me. It's taking away from time, and I don't really want to do this. Now, you will hear a lot of people say you shouldn't quit things midway. You should finish out the term. But I actually quit midterm. I emailed them and I said, look, there's some other things going on in my life. I can't continue this in this role. And, I think the worry we have in our mind is it's going to hurt our career. And I think this actually helped my career because it opened up time for the things I was really passionate about. And, be involved on the national level on those topics. So again, I went against the advice of some mentors and against the stereotypical advice and quit this executive committee. And it was one of the best things that I've ever done. So again, this is sometimes where having a coach or someone else to help you really hold up a mirror and look at what's important to you when you're thinking about things to eliminate from your life. So we're not talking about trying to balance your life. We're not talking about trying to keep all those plates up in the air. And I'll give you an example from this past week. So I have my just regular schedule, which for me is a very, I keep my schedule at a bare minimum so I have time to flex up. It's not bare minimum. I keep it kind of in the middle so I have time to flex up and down. And I had a little bit more things on my schedule last week. I'd volunteered for some things with kids. And then there were a couple of work things I had to deal with. And then there were a couple issues with my parents and some of their finances and things that I had to drive down to New Jersey to help them with. And last week, there were broken plates all over the ground. So the reason I'm telling you this is like, don't employ these methods and expect that because you're employing these, everything is going to be perfect all of the time. Things are still going to be thrown at you. Life is going to be unexpected. It's just the way life is. The difference I've noticed between now and before I started doing coaching is I'm not as upset when the plates fall. So last week, I actually was supposed to attend a coaching seminar and I canceled it. I just emailed back. And to my surprise, I know the woman who was running it. She was like, oh, we can get you into another session. And I was like, perfect. But in the past, I wouldn't have canceled that. I would have been like, oh my God, I'm just going to trudge through everything and burn out and try to get all this done. So I recognized some plates I could drop down. And then I didn't beat myself up for having a really crappy week. So the bounce back from these bad weeks when everything's thrown at you is much faster than it used to be, where I used to say, oh my God, I'm doing it all wrong. This is terrible. There's no way I can do all this. So it's really letting go of that expectation that everything is supposed to work out perfectly all of the time. And so the mindset shift here is if I'm doing it right, I'll be happy, calm all the time. And I want to tell you that's not true. The fact is life is 50-50. No matter what you do, life is 50-50, right? 50% happy time, 50%, some struggle. The key is not to make that 50% struggle turn into 60%, 70%, because we're telling ourselves we shouldn't be in the struggle. Accept the struggle part, knowing that the next day, the next week, you're going to be in the 50% of happy. So basically, these are methods to just kind of declutter your life, whether it's decluttering things in your day, whether it's decluttering mindsets. And we're really shifting towards, again, another infographic from Adam Grant to, I have to do all these things, to filling your life with, I want to do these things. And now this doesn't mean the things you want to do, you're always going to feel happy about, or they're going to be, high value. Like, let's talk about like paying your taxes, right? Like, I don't have to pay my taxes. I cannot pay my taxes and then, deal with IRS fines and repercussions and all of that. But if I change it to, I want to pay them because I don't want to deal with those headaches later, it just changes it a little bit. So again, just because you want to do it, it doesn't always mean it's going to be fun. Now, at the end of a talk like this, I always think there's like two camps of people, right? There's the camp of people who are like, this is amazing. Oh my God, I want to do all of it at once. And then there's going to be the people who are like, none of this is going to work. I'm not going to do any of this. But luckily, my advice to both of you is take it just one small step at a time. Pick one thing, one small step, try it out. Refine it if it needs to be refined. If it's working for you, then pick the next thing. And what I found, for me, working with a coach and having someone guide me on this, there's a lot of skills that I think are not taught throughout our life that are very helpful when you're going through this. So managing other people's opinions, right? When I tell some moms, your kids don't have to be in 5 or 6 activities, and they're like, oh my God, but what would other people think? And all the other kids are in all of these. Learning to manage other people's opinions and let it go. Learning how to really develop healthy boundaries, right? And enforcing your boundaries. And this doesn't have to be confrontational. You can have healthy boundaries that have no confrontation. How to say no. I talked about saying no to that executive committee. This is a skill that we don't really get to work on much. And especially if we're junior in our career, we're often told don't say no to anything, right? Say no to, or say yes to everything, because you never know where the possibilities are going to lead you. But then we end up raising people in our workforce that don't know how to say no and end up taking on too much. Things that, maybe, my boss or chair wouldn't love, but like figuring out what's the bare minimum, right? I'll apply this to kids. The bare minimum I have to do for my kids is I have to feed them, I have to keep them clothed, I have to send them to school, and I have to love them, right? Anything else is gravy. So some weeks I'm super mom and I'm volunteering for the musical and they're, 5K smart run and doing all that. And some weeks, like, we're doing scrambled eggs for dinner and we're staying in our pajamas all day because that's all we can do. So figure out what the bare minimum is in all aspects of your life, because sometimes you're going to need that if other parts of your life are going crazy. And then the concept of C- work, in medicine, we have a lot of overachievers and we're always trying to do A+ work. And sometimes it's not necessary. My classic example for C- work is charting. Your charting doesn't have to be a literary masterpiece. It can be C- work that just gets the important concepts through to the next provider. And then we talked a lot about prioritizing you. So that's what I have for everybody. I'm going to stop sharing and see if folks have questions, comments.
Susanna, Don Boyer has an interesting question. Don, do you want to just ask it?
Sure. Thanks, Susanna. This is really great. And I love the intentional change model. That's one of my favorite models for a lot of things in life. I'm curious how you think about this and navigating the citizenship aspect of so much of what we're asked to do. Our bosses come to us and no one necessarily wants to make the schedule, and that probably doesn't fit anyone's core values. And yet it's still something that has to happen. And it, is potentially something that people are expecting for promotions criteria or whatever it might be. How do you think about and how do you coach people in navigating this with the citizenship piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's going to depend on whether it's like you need to do citizenship stuff and you get to pick what you want, or are you saying like a citizenship thing where like your boss is assigning it to you?
I think more in the being voluntold oftentimes, right?
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So a couple things I have people look for. I have first like look at their life and say, like, do you have time for this? Do you not have time for this? How would this fit into your life? Is this something that could it fit into your core values? Is there something where you're like, yeah, I could do this or that? Or what resources do you need so that it minimizes the impact of your life, but you're still doing this for your boss? So I like the yes and, like when your boss asks you something, yes, I can do this, and this is what I would need to do it effectively, or and this is how I would need to go about it. So I think you talked about maybe being a scheduler, right? Yes, and is there supported time you might need for it? Is there help from an admin you might need for it? Is there a scheduling software that would help you? I think a lot of times we just, and they might say no. Again, just because you offer options to, your boss doesn't mean that they're going to say yes, but you have to really think about, if I have to do this, take the components of, are there parts of it I can outsource? And then also what resources would I need to do this effectively?
That's
Or
really helpful. Thank
something
you.
else you have to drop, right? That's as well too. I could do this if I let go of this other responsibility.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions, struggles, thoughts?
Carla said, great talk, Suzana, fantastic.
Aw, thanks to Carla.
Wonderful talk, thank you, from Kathy Shaw.
Well, I will say also to folks, if you have any questions or concerns, but don't want to, say it out loud on like a Zoom call here, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Suzana.Tsao at pennmedicine.upenn.edu. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about these concepts or these strategies. Yeah, and I guess that's all I have for you guys.
Can I ask you, can you share with us some resources that you used? Just for, because I think it's a great model. It's a wonderful model. So if you can share additional resources or readings that we can do to follow up from your talk, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that for a little bit because it's really not based on one or two readings. It's something I kind of created just with my training as a life coach and then being coached for the past couple of years. Like I said, I just started reading a little bit more about the intentional change theory, but that's a very academic, theoretic basis and not like a practical one. But I'll look through my books and try to figure out some of like the best ones about mindset shifts and send it out to folks.
All right. Thank you. Awesome.
Marana, there will be a recording link sent out. Any other questions? Thanks, Suzana. Curse of a good talk is now most of CHOP will ask you for more. You've been warned.
Eva, I will gladly take it. Gladly take it.
Sharing if helpful, Dr. Lori Santos Happiness Lab. Christopher, do you want to say anything about that? Give us a little more information.
No, sure. Thanks, Suzana. She actually was a speaker series at the Kimmel Center a couple of weeks ago. She's a professor at Yale. And during COVID, she offered a class there that I think a quarter of the college signed up for. So they had to hold it in like the stadium. But she has like 10 insights on happiness and a podcast. And so if you just Google search her, you can she has a lot of good sort of tips and insights and tricks to more focus on being happy. But I think that's part of what we're all looking for. So
yeah, her podcast is really engaging.
So Suzana, do you want to just put your email in the chat so people actually have it? And I urge you, if you do want to reach out one-on-one, I think sometimes having the opportunity to debrief around your own issues and curate them is a wonderful thing. I want to thank you, thank you, thank you. This was wonderful and very concrete strategies, which often are not given. So thank you so, so much. Take good care, everybody, and thank you for coming to the session.